Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the channel and to my August reading wrap up. So August was a bit of a rough month for me, I guess, in terms of my reading. I was very busy with work and sometimes I just didn't get the opportunity to pick up a book in the evening like I normally would. I was too tired, or I just wanted to do something else to rest my eyes after a busy week of proofreading. So I was reading 5 books over the course of the month and only finished 3 of them. 2 of them were DNFs. I did have another 2 that I started but haven't finished yet, and I'll cover those off in next month's wrap up. But what does that mean for this month's wrap up? Well, 3 books finished just means that there's a little bit less to talk about, although I will of course cover off the DNFs when I talk about the books as well. You can skip straight to that section using the chapter titles below. In the meantime though, you'll get the stats, and those 3 books that I've finished, because I don't include the DNFs within the page stats or anything along those lines, I ended up with 1,359 pages read in August, taking me to 18,276 year to date. The average page count was 453, so 489 pages now is the average page count for the year to date, and the average rating was pretty good. I think it was my best of the year so far, although obviously only based on 3 books. I ended up the month with 4.33 average rating, so the year to date average rating is now up slightly to 3.96. So coming towards the end of the year, I know we've got a few months left, but to have an average rating that's nearly at 4 towards the end of the year is really, really good, and it just shows that I've had some fantastic books through the course of the year, even if it did take me so long to get that elusive first 5-star read. In terms of the series, I've now started 17 different series this year, only finished 2 of them. There'll be at least 1 more finished series in next month's wrap up, hopefully 2, we shall see. I've got 5 series that I've read the first book of and decided I'm not going to continue and read book 2. Of the series that I've got ongoing at the moment, of which there are 40, I'm up to date with 21 of those. And the day since the last 5-star read, as the last stat as always, is currently sitting at 21 days. So on to the books then, and as usual I'll cover these off in the order that I finished reading them or DNF'd them, and we're going to start off with an audiobook which was Demon's Reign by David Estes and Bengali. I read the opening chapter of this one as part of my first chapter reads, and I had a good time with it. I was looking forward to reading it, which I did as an audio buddy read with my book bestie Nina. Now this one, it was the first of the DNFs, I'm sad to say. I finished this one, I put it down at 14%, so I did a fair few chapters of it to start off with, but I just couldn't get invested in it. It was an interesting world. The whole concept of it, with these kind of giant, almost world trees, I guess, they're kind of cities or nations within these giant mile-high trees, and you've got all of the weird and wonderful things that come along with that you have to pull out of your imagination, basically, as the author, because these things just don't exist. So you've got these giant, I can't remember what they were, almost like termites that they had to go mining into the tree for instance, because if you get an infestation, if it gets out of control, they burrow through the tree and they can end up chopping the tree down essentially by weakening the trunk. So you've got all of these really cool concepts for it, but I just didn't get into it. I think part of it for me was the writing or the writing style. So the first chapter was very different. It was in the third person. I was following it along. It was intriguing. I quite enjoyed it. But then the next chapter onwards, I can't remember if that was a prologue or an actual chapter 1, but from the next chapter onwards, it was all in the first person instead of the third. So it was a complete shift, and it didn't work for me. I preferred the opening where it was in the third person. I was getting along with that. Writing style worked for me, and I don't know if it was just that kind of jarring shift or if it just for another reason didn't work as well for me, but either way I couldn't get into it, and I found that I was after I got to that sort of 14%, I hadn't picked it up in a few days, and I was talking to Nina about it, who'd managed to finish it. She'd read on further than I had, and I decided I'm not sure it's going to work for me. I'm going to put it down because I need to move on to something else that I know, or hope at least, that I'm going to enjoy a bit more. So sad to say, this one I did not get to the end of. As a replacement for that, though, I picked up Master of Furies. No, I didn't. As a replacement for that one, I picked up Queen of Storms, which is book 2 of the Farmane Saga by Raymond D. Feist. And this one, I had a good time with. I kind of knew I would because I'm very familiar with the author's writing, but also because I really enjoyed book 1. It was nearly a 5-star read for me, and I was looking forward to it. I knew the characters, I knew the world, I knew the story, I knew what I was getting into and where we were continuing on from, and I was really looking forward to finding out where we went, basically, what was going to be the next stage, what was going to happen, how it was all going to pan out. Now, obviously, I'm not going to talk too much about the inner workings of this one because it's a book 2 in the series and I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, I continued to have a really good time with it. There were some points in it that I didn't like, some characters who I liked, who, it's a fantasy world, it's a brutal fantasy world, and sometimes people die, and that's what we had here. And I wasn't a fan of kind of that and the way it worked and the, I guess, reasonings for it. Partly because it's the way this particular one I'm talking about vaguely happened. It's kind of a well-known and sometimes not very well-liked trope, and yeah, I didn't appreciate it too much, but it did lead to, as the kind of ramifications of that, did lead to some good storylines. So, I mean, that's why it happens, that's what you get. Sometimes it works, sometimes maybe not so much, but overall here I really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the progression of the characters. I'm enjoying where everything's going. I've already started book 3, which is Master of Furies, because I had a bit of time left over at the end of the month, so yeah, I'm really having a good time with this series. This one was, despite that kind of 1 or 2 things that I didn't like so much, this one was a good time and I ended up giving it 5 stars. Onto the physical reads that I had next, and I read Dreams of Dust by Lillian Crowe. This is book 1 of Will of the Wayfinder. This is another one that I read the first chapter of. I don't know how long ago this one was, several months, maybe over a year ago. It was quite a while, but I really enjoyed it. It sounded like a really cool world, some good characters, some good aspects to it, and I was looking forward to it. I finally got round to it, and yeah, I had a good time with this one. It continued in that vein of having a really inventive and expansive world, and I loved exploring it. There were a few things that I would have liked to continue a bit more from the opening chapter. I can't remember what they're called, but there were these kind of giant, I think they were foxes or fox-like creatures that were used as steeds, and we didn't see too much of those later on, but I thought they were a really cool aspect. There were some other things that came in to replace the absence of those, or to fill the absence of those, so there was lots of weird and wonderful things, lots of creativity in the world building as we went through with this one. I was probably expecting a multi-POV story from this one. It seemed to me that it was kind of set up for it, even though the synopsis, you've got a main character who you're following. I was still expecting a couple of side stories from other characters, maybe who aren't part of his group, but we didn't really get that. And having read it, I don't think we needed that. It was just my expectations, basically. I liked the overall story. Some of the, I mean, it's in the title, Dreams of Dust. Some of the dream aspects of it I thought were a little bit weird, but you get that, and dreams kind of, they can be a bit weird anyway, especially in a fantasy world where they're not typical dreams. They're kind of, I guess, planted dreams. There are things that are making these characters have the dreams, and then you do get sections in here as well where you get locked in dreams and people have got to go in and try and retrieve them, to try and rescue them from their dreams. So there's some really cool elements around that. Some good battles in here. I really enjoyed them. I liked several of the characters. I liked where it went overall, even though it was, I would say, a very linear storyline. There weren't too many little side branches off it. It was just kind of very focused on one, I guess, quest overall, but it was a really enjoyable read, and I'm looking forward to exploring this world more and reading the next book in it. This is one that I gave 4 stars to because I had a really good time with it. Then another one that I did on audiobook, this is Stone and Sky, book 1 of a series of the same name by Z.S. Diamante, and it's another one that I really enjoyed. So again, this is showing why my average rating for the month was good, because I had several books that I really had a good time with. This kind of harks back to classic fantasy. It's one of those styles of writing that I really enjoy. It's a classic fantasy kind of vibe, but with a modern writing style. It just really works for me, maybe because I've grown up reading those classic fantasies and really enjoyed them. It's what got me into the genre. So I love it when I find a new one, and this was no exception. Some great storytelling aspects in here. I like that my expectations were kind of subverted a little bit, because we have kind of viewpoints on both sides of this great war that's starting up or looking to continue after a bit of a hiatus, maybe, depending on how you look at it. But it's not necessarily the way it turned out. I was a bit kind of wondering why we've got this viewpoint of someone on the other side and how that's all going to work out, but I was pleasantly surprised with how it went. Overall, I think the world building was really cool. We do have quite a bit of information at the start of it, as you've got a character who's explaining kind of a bit of the history of the world and of his order, as he's one of these griffin god, as you can see on the cover there. So he's kind of explaining to someone who you feel should know most of this, but obviously it's really explaining for us as the reader. Some people don't like that. I don't think it was done badly here. I think it could have maybe been abbreviated a little bit perhaps, or delivered in a different way, but at the end of the day I got the information that I needed. It was a really enjoyable story, a good narration as well for the audiobook, another one that I'm looking forward to continuing the series of and learning more, and it's another one that I gave 4 stars to. And then the last book that I picked up was sadly another DNF. This one was Dark Oak by Jacob Sannock's book 1 of the Dark Oak Chronicles, I think it is. It's recently re-released the trilogy as an omnibus edition, so that is available on ebook and audiobook, I believe, if you wanted to go and pick these up and have a look at them. Now, I admit I did sample this one on audio first of all, because I was potentially looking to pick up another audiobook at the end of the month, and I really enjoyed it because the narrator seemed like a good narrator from the sample I read or listened to, and it was sort of good voices and things like that. But it had it wasn't graphic audio, but it had a few sound effects to it. It had a bit of an orchestral backing to it, and just the way the start of the book opens, it's kind of, this is not a story about a Dark Lord, but there is a Dark Lord, and then telling you a bit about the history. And with this kind of orchestral backing and with the narration, he had a really kind of powerful voice that was really well suited to it. It just sounded like it was the opening narration to a Lord of the Rings movie. It was just really well done. But anyway, I read the ebook of this one to about 12%, and I was enjoying it, but I wasn't really invested in it. I couldn't get to any of the characters really, and I wasn't really getting into the story too much either. But there was one part just before I decided to put it down where it didn't really work for me. I could understand why it happened, but I would never understand it happening, if that makes sense. So I know why it was done from a storytelling point of view, but it's basically a mother sacrificing a child to be able to escape with another couple of children. That's obviously a really hard choice to make, and it's a choice that no one should ever have to make. But I really didn't like how it was approached in this story, because it was all just, for my mind, very sudden. There was no decision-making process. There was no thought at all put into it. It was just suddenly, I'm just going to drown this child so that we can escape the notice of these dogs that are chasing us. And it just kind of really threw me how it seemed to suddenly come up out of nowhere. I literally had to skip back a couple of paragraphs and just see, had I actually read that correctly? But I put the book down a few pages, I think, after that. There was a new chapter starting. I got a few pages into the new chapter. I put the book down to do something else, and I was still thinking about that. And a couple of days later, I realised I've not picked it up again. So, as I say, I wasn't really invested in the story. Definitely wasn't invested in the characters. I didn't like that particular element of it, and I decided, with all of that put together, to put this one down at about the 12% mark and try something else. So, wasn't the greatest end to the month in terms of reading, but overall it was a pretty good month. the 3 books that I finished all did well, 4, 4 and 5 stars. A couple of other books that I did start but haven't finished, I'm enjoying at the moment as well, so so I think that's a win overall. The DNFs do come along every so often because you don't know how you're going to land with a book until you start reading it, and I'm happy DNFing a book because I want to continue reading things that I'm enjoying. If I'm not enjoying it, I'm going to put it down. So that was my reading month for August anyway. How was yours? I hope you had a good one. Let me know in the comments down below. I'll hopefully see you in the next video sometime soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.